Okay, you asked for me to explain a little bit about how the verb system works in X-word grammar terms. So here we go. This is just a quick explanation. There's going to be different exceptions, things like that. But anyway, here we go. So the first thing that X-word does is it sets up an orientation. In English has two orientations, either the present or the past. So let me show you how we could describe the present orientation. So first of all, we're thinking about the present, and then when we think about actions occurring in the present, we can think about them as being at the same time we're talking about. Or we can think about, well, let's talk about same time first. So let's say I'm talking about every day. It's present, same time. And so I say every day, for example, you drink 2 cups of coffee. Or every day she walks to work. And basically, when we're talking about the same time in the present, we're going to wind up using the no S and S forms. But in addition, you could talk about the present using, for example, X words like am, are, and is. So you could say, I am in school, or you are drinking coffee. Oh, skip that one. We'll go to that one later. He is a mechanic, for example. But just because you're talking about the present, it doesn't mean that all the actions happen at the same time. So, for example, some actions can be later. So I'm talking about today, I'm thinking about today, but I want to talk about something later. So I say tomorrow, for example, uh, he will see a movie. Or tomorrow they will go to a baseball game. In the talk about the later, what we're going to do is we're going to use the X word will together with the base form. Now, I'm still thinking about the present, but for example, I want to talk about something not at the present, but something earlier. So, for example, you could say, you are not hungry now because you have eaten a big breakfast. So what we're doing now is we're using the X word have together with the DTN form, and that shows us that the action is earlier, that's the have, and then it's finished with DTN. So we have present is an orientation, and this idea of earlier, same time, and later we can call the relationship of the action to the time we're talking about. Now, there's one more thing that we can still talk about. Let me underline present as an orientation. Is we can talk about something called aspect. An aspect means the action is either finished or not finished, or we can think about it in terms of the action has length. And it doesn't necessarily mean when we say the action has length, it doesn't really necessarily mean that it's a long action. We just mean that we can feel that there's a beginning and an end to it. The action has some kind of a duration. And the duration could be 2 or 3 seconds, or it could be 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days. It doesn't matter. But how we show that is with the ing form. And let's say we're talking about the present. That's the orientation. We're talking about the action is in a relationship of same time to the time we're talking about. So let's say we're talking about now in the present. And we can say, for example, you are watching this video. I use the ing form to show that the action's not finished or the action has some length to it. And I use the X words am, are, is to show that it's tied with the present and the relationship is the same time. We can do this same thing later. So I'm thinking about present, I'm thinking about later, and then I'm thinking about an action that's not finished or has some length later. So we could say something like, he will be watching a movie tomorrow evening at about 7 o'clock. The will shows me it's later. The ing shows me that the action's not finished, and we always need to tie some form of the X word will with the base form, and that's what we're using, is we're using the base form be. So basically, we could say that there's 3 ties here, or 2 ties. Well, 3 ties because will also ties with the present. But at any rate, you get the idea of how it works. And let's talk a little bit about earlier. So now we're talking about earlier. We're thinking about the present still, and we're thinking about an action that has some length or it's not finished. So for example, let's say you have been watching this video for about 5 or 6 minutes now. The have shows me we're thinking about the present. The have ties with the DTN form of be, been, and then we need some form of be or been or am or are, whatever, to tie with the ing form. And this form tells me this, for example, this verb phrase tells me we're talking about the present, and the action is earlier than the present and has some length to it. In this case, it looks like it hasn't finished and it's continuing from an earlier time up to the present. So basically, this is how you talk about verb system in English using X-word grammar terms. And if you wanted to, I could do this for fun for you if you want to see. So let me grab another paper here. Hold on a second. And now let's say we're talking about, we have the present over here. Here's the present. It's the same time we're talking about. And here we have later. But here we have some later time that we're talking about. So let's say this, for example, is tomorrow evening. The orientation is still present. The relationship of the action that I'm thinking about is later than the present. But it's also possible to talk about an action that's somewhere over here. It's finished earlier than this later time, but also the action is later than the present time. So you can imagine, how would we do that? Let's take a subject, you. Now, how do I show it's later? I use will. How do I show earlier? I use have. Well, I don't know. Oh, I see. Okay, I took the mouse off there. Sorry about that. So I use will to show later than the present. I use have to show earlier than this later time tomorrow evening. And then I need a verb. You will have watched this video several times by tomorrow evening. And of course, we didn't get involved in all the time phrases that go with these different forms, but that's why it's so important to we always have to kind of tell students and people um, what time expressions go together with these verb forms, because they set up this whole idea of orientation, relationship, and aspect. So, for example, here we have an action that's later than the present, will. I tie it with the X word have. I got two X words here. This base form of have shows me that the action is earlier. And the DTN form, that's what the DTN form, I didn't mention this before, but the DTN form always tells us the action's finished. So here, and then of course you always have the not finished action, or the action with length. You will have been watching this video for 10 minutes by the time your husband gets home from work. So now the action's later than the present, it's earlier than some later time, and the action has length, or it continued, it's not finished until this time. Basically, what we saw then is we saw 8 different ways to talk about the verb. Let me move that up a little bit. And we had, for example, let's say present, same time, finished. Then we have present, same time, not finished. We have present, later, finished. Present, later, not finished. We have earlier. We have present, earlier, finished. Present, later, finished. Oop, not finished. And then we have these 2 more. No, this is getting so confusing. I'm trying to beat the clock because I just got 15 minutes to record the video. So, and then we have these 2 more ways to do it, which is present, later, but also earlier than another time, finished. And then we have present, later, earlier than another time, not finished. So here we have definitely, there's 8 different ways to write the verb. And the really fun part about this is once you explain the 8 ways to do it in the present, we always have to kind of get the point of view that the past at one time was the present. The present is always kind of slipping into the past as the present moves forward. The present is on some line that's always moving, 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 moving. But what's left behind is past events or past times. And so it's really easy to explain all this to a class, because once you explain the present, you're basically done, because the past, all we do is we change the X words or no S to S forms with the past form, and that's it. The relationships, the aspect, the orientation, basically it's the same point of view on all of this. So I hope I explained this to you. I hope I didn't make it too kind of convoluted, but it's actually a very simple, and it's kind of a very elegant way to do it, because you can see in 15 minutes, even with moving the papers around and blah, 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 I basically told you the whole verb system of English. So let me know what you think about this, and then I'll send you this video link in a few minutes. Bye.